If you would open up your books of the Bible to Ephesians chapter 6. Ephesians chapter 6. Again, I say it again. I meant to say thank you the first time for leading that song, Casey, about the whole armor of God, or the armor of God at least. Soldiers of Christ, arise and put your armor on. Ephesians chapter 6, verses 10 brings out a first thought. It says, as Paul is finishing this chapter of the book, this letter to the Ephesians, he says, "Finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord," in verse 10, "and in the power of his might, put on the whole armor of God, that ye may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil." Then in verse 12, he says, "We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers, against the powers and the rulers of darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places." Let's talk about in governments in places of office. In verse 14, "Stand therefore, having your loins girt about with truth, and having on the breastplate of righteousness, and your feet shod with the preparation of the gospel of peace." That idea of preparation of the gospel of peace, that idea of preparation is vigilance. Be prepared for the gospel of peace. And as we continue on, above all, it says, "Taking the shield of faith, wherewith ye shall be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked, and take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God." And he continues on, but we're going to stop right there, and I'm going to give you an illustration of a soldier. He was tasked to stand in this place and guard this place. Pretty soon, he looked about. There was a tree over there, and another tree right past it, and a bench underneath that tree. As he was standing there guarding, the heat shined down on him, and he grew tired. He grew weary. And because of a lack of comfort, he took his helmet off and he wiped the sweat from his brow and put his helmet back on. Eventually, it would beat down even further on him, and he would say, "You know what? I'll still guard my spot. I'll still guard, but I'll guard from over there." So he leaves his spot and walks underneath that tree. The idea of sin is to miss the mark. But as soldiers of Christ, we're told to stand in the way. When this man, this guard, this soldier left his spot, he sinned. He missed the spot in the fact that he moved from it. Eventually, as he's standing underneath that shady tree, the sun once again moved around, and it was beating down on him again. He says, "Man, I can't take this." So he moves over to the other tree. And again, sweat is still pouring down. So he takes his helmet off and he says, "You know what? I'm just going to take my helmet off and leave it off because I can see my enemy better this way." But he doesn't realize he took off the helmet of salvation. This represents one who is living in sin. To take off that helmet of salvation, he needs to free his hands, so he sheaths his sword with the Spirit. This represents someone who doesn't preach, someone who doesn't represent the gospel, someone who doesn't care about the words of God. He puts down his helmet on that bench. He says, "Man, if I had another sword, I'd be better to fight against the enemy." So he puts down the shield of faith. This represents someone who starts to doubt. Someone who starts to doubt that faith can be a shield. He picks up a sword. This could be a sword of dogma. It could be anything. It could be anything except the Word of God. He has the Word of God right here strapped to his side, but he has another sword. This could be anything a man has. This could be commentary. Could be works of men, books, good books, but they're not the Bible. But he put his shield of faith down. Eventually, as time goes by, he says, I don't need two swords. I'll just sheath them both, put them down. And as he's standing there, as time progresses, he's like, I don't see anyone coming. And it's still hot. I might as well take a seat. So as he gets down and he gets ready to sit down, he feels a sharp pain in his side. And he realizes, well, the breastplate of righteousness, well, that's not meant to be sitting down on. So he says, I'm going to take this breastplate off. But to do that, he first has to ungird himself with the belt of truth. This represents someone who doesn't care about the truth, doesn't really care about the facts. See, he can avoid the facts. He can sell the facts for a little bit of comfort. How many churches today have sold the truth, have sold the facts for comfort? But I won't go further into that. So he takes his belt off and he puts it right next to his sword, his shield, and his helmet. And he says, now I can take off my breastplate of righteousness. This represents someone who doesn't care that God saved him, someone who has forgotten that God has saved him, someone that Peter writes in 2 Peter chapter 1, someone who has forgotten that he was saved. And so he sits down. His breastplate is off. His belt is off. His shield is down, literally. His helmet is off. He's not prepared for Satan. He's not prepared for his enemy. And as time goes on, he says, man, I really want to stretch my toes. So he tries to stretch his toes, but he's got shoes on. So he unloosens his shoes. He doesn't take them off. He just unlooses them. Now he's not even prepared for the gospel of peace. This is an illustration of Satan's gospel of peace. He wants you to be comfortable. He wants you to hear the words, peace, peace. But there is no peace. This represents someone who is unfit or unprepared for his enemy or for the Lord and those trumpets. If he sees the enemy, he won't be prepared to put all those things back on. If he sees the Lord, he'll still have no time to prepare to put all those things back on. That's why it's our duty to keep the armor of faith on, to put on the whole armor of God. Why? That you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. That heat in the beginning that made him move could be anything. It could be anything that leads to temptation. He wasn't expecting to move at first. It wasn't his intention. But he moved a little bit. And he missed the spot. He missed the mark. Brethren, let's not miss the mark which we have. We're told to stand fast in the faith, stand firm, and to have the full armor of God. Let's not put down our armor of God. Let's not put down our shield of the faith. And let's always encourage one another to be there for each other. That's all I had today. If you have anything, if you need prayers, if you found yourself that you have put down the shield of faith or the sword of the Spirit, or you haven't put on preparation of the gospel of peace, now's the time. Because now is all we have. As together we stand and sing.